Hello and welcome to the Essex Boys Murder Case, part 33. Before watching this video, I recommend watching part 4 onwards on YouTube first, as these videos are all about the key individuals and the murder victims' movements on the day of the 6th of December 1995. A quick mention to the Facebook page called The Real Essex Boys Murder Club. If you're interested, please feel free to join, as there's some great people on there with a lot of knowledge on this subject. So I've decided to stay at the track for the moment and cram in as many videos as I can before moving on with Mick Steele, Jack Wilms and Darren Nichols along the rest of their journey they made that night. Then after that, I'm going to be moving on to Billy Jasper and his version of events and discussing if certain crime families or firms had any involvement in the triple murders. So I'll give you a quick catch up on where I go up to with these Day of the Murder videos, and I've been going on Darren Nichols' version of events according to his second statement. Darren Nichols has just received a call from Jack Wilms to go and pick them up. He drives to the entrance of the track and Jack Wilms climbs into the back of the Passat covered in specks of blood. Moments later, Mick Steele comes up the track and he gets into the front passenger seat, and the time is approximately 7:05 PM. In my last video, I tried to pinpoint the time and location of the phone call Tony Tucker made to Gary Jackets, who was the manager of the Global Net Cafe, to change the booking from 4 persons to 6. I narrowed it down to 2 specific journeys the Essex Boys made prior to their murders, and the more plausible time that phone call was made. In this video, I will be talking about the 6:44 PM call from Sarah Saunders to Pat Tates' mobile and explain to you how this call could not have taken place as the Range Rover went down the track. According to Darren Nichols, he was told by Mick Steele, who was in the Range Rover as it went down the track, that he had heard Pat Tate's mobile ring and it was Sarah Saunders. Mick Steele told Darren Nichols that he had overheard them talking and couldn't believe how well they were getting on, as Sarah Saunders had told Mick Steele how awful Pat Tate had been to her as of late. This call could not have taken place as the Range Rover went down the farm track like Darren Nichols says, and I will explain why in this video. Now, don't believe everything you read in the books and see in the films. The books are ghost written and the films are part fact, part fiction. Having read the books, a few things just don't add up. They can't have been true, and it was impossible. The films, we had the producer from the Rise of the Foot Soldier on our Facebook group not so long ago, and he was saying the information he got to actually make the films he got from a book, and the rest was film reality, which is exactly right. He was spot on. The best source of information on this subject is the court transcripts. If you'd like to look through the court transcripts, you can see them on our Facebook group. If you can't find them, just ask anyone on there and they'll point to where they are. Or you could ask the admins and they will pinpoint where they are on the actual Facebook group. And then you can have a look through them yourselves. And maybe just it might just change your mind on the whole Essex Boys saga. So I'm going to explain how that 6:44 PM call between Sarah Saunders and Pat Tate never took place as the Range Rover went down the farm track. And what I'm going to do is pinpoint where this call was actually made in this video. So here we have the Rettendon farm track at White House Farm, And on the evening prior to the murders, the Range Rover drove up the A130 and it turned right into the entrance of the track, and it drove along here, and then it bears left up here, and then when they got to this point here they would have turned right and drove along here, and they would have come to a halt because the 5-bar gate would have been just up here. Now, from the entrance of the track to the padlocked 5-bar gate is a short distance, and it takes about 1 minute to 1 minute 20 seconds to walk down, as it says in the court transcripts. One of our admins on the Facebook group, Dave Saville, he's been out and about at this location. He's actually filmed himself walking down from the entrance right down to the 5-bar gate. And he says it took him just slightly over 1 minute to reach the 5-bar gate, but no more than 1 minute 30 seconds. Now, seeing as they were in a Range Rover, the time from the entrance to get to the 5-bar gate would have been a lot shorter. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to say the Range Rover from the entrance driving down to the 5-bar gate took approximately 30 seconds. The call from Sarah Saunders to Pat Tate lasted for 2 minutes 46 seconds. So if the call did take place down the track, which is a 30-second drive, what were they doing the other 2 minutes 16 seconds when they arrived at the 5-bar gate? It doesn't take 2 minutes 46 seconds to drive down the track. It takes 30 seconds to drive down. So if the call took place like Darren Nichols was told by Mick Steele, what were they doing the other 2 minutes 16 seconds? What were they all doing whilst Pat Tate was on the phone with Sarah Saunders? There's a whole 2 minutes 16 seconds missing, and that's why the phone call never took place as the Range Rover went down the track. This is where Darren Nichols' fact from fiction crosses over. Did Darren Nichols get help from the police with his second statement to fit in the Range Rover going down the track at that specific time of 6:44 p.m. when the call between Sarah Saunders and Pat Tate took place, and to say Mick Steele told him it happened as the Range Rover went down the track to put him at the murder scene shortly before the executions? There's unrecorded interviews between Darren Nichols and the police that can't be accounted for. Was this the police helping Darren Nichols with his statement in order to get convictions? Did they overlook that the call made by Sarah Saunders to Pat Tate at 6:44 p.m. lasted 2 minutes 46 seconds, and the drive down the track to the 5-bar gate only takes 30 seconds? Did the defence ever question Darren Nichols on this whilst he was on the stand? I mean, to me, Darren Nichols and the police, the books and films have got this wrong. That call did not take place as the Range Rover went down the track. So I will try and pinpoint the area where that call from Sarah Saunders to Pat Tate took place. Just before I start, I'd just like to tell you, this video took absolutely ages to put together. I mean, all the research that went into this is probably the hardest one I've actually had to do to date. So yeah, I mean, I literally had to go on when the murders took place, according to Darren Nichols' second statement. The journey from the Hungry Hippo in Rayleigh to the Rettendon area. I had to fit in the places, and the times it took to locate where this 6:44 p.m. call could have taken place, and it lasted 2 minutes 46 seconds. So I had to pinpoint where it started and where it actually ended. Right, so let's start. Now, this is a shot from Google Earth, and as you can see here, this is the Rettendon Turnpike. Just to the left up here, I don't think you can see it, but basically up here is the River Crouch. And this road here, down here, this is the A130 where the Range Rover would have driven along that evening. So, we know from the phone log evidence that Jack Williams phoned Darren Nichols at 6:59 p.m. To come and pick them up. So the murders have taken place. So let's say the murders took place at, say, 6:55 to 6:57 p.m. The distance from the Rettendon Turnpike to the track takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes. So if they got to the turnpike, it would have been 6:51 to 6:52 p.m. So this call took place before the Range Rover reached the Rettendon Turnpike here. As we know, this call started at 6:44 p.m. and it lasted for 2 minutes 46 seconds. So the red marker down here, this is where the Hungry Horse pub is. This is where Mick Steele parked up in his Hilux, and then he got out and climbed into the Range Rover. The time was approximately 6:35 to 6:40 p.m. Now this journey from the Hungry Horse in Rayleigh to the Rettendon Turnpike takes about 7 or 8 minutes, which takes us up to 6:45 to 6:48 p.m. The journey they would have took, leaving the Hungry Hippo, would have been along here, which is Downhill Road, I think it's called. They would have gone along here, and they would have turned left onto Rawworth Lane and gone along here, and got to this part here, which is the Rayleigh Cricket Club, which I'll show you on a Google Earth view in a moment. But basically they've driven along this road here, and they've got to here, which is the Rawworth turning, and they would have gone right and headed up towards the Rettendon Turnpike. So what we'll do now is I'll show you a Google Earth view of Rawworth Lane and that actual cricket pitch, and then I'll take you on to where the phone call began. So the red marker here is the Rayleigh Cricket Club, and this lane here is Rawworth Lane, and just up here to the right is the turning for Rawworth, and basically they would have been turning right in the Range Rover and driving along this part here. So the journey from the Hungry Horse in Rayleigh to the Rettendon Turnpike takes about 7 or 8 minutes, which takes us up to 6:45 to 6:48 p.m. So say at 6:37 p.m. they left Rawworth Lane here, and they headed up towards the Rettendon Turnpike, driving along here. As we go along this road, I think it's the A1245, we should come to the River Crouch. Yeah, so they're driving along here, heading towards the Rettendon Turnpike. And here we are, we're just coming up to the River Crouch now. River Crouch. Yeah, so they're driving along the A1245 here, and just as the Range Rover goes over River Crouch, this is where the phone call from Sarah Saunders to Pat Tate started, and it lasted for 2 minutes 46 seconds. And the call would have ended at 6:47 p.m. So it would have been along this stretch of the road here and not down the track as they portray in the films and books. In fact, the call would have finished before they even reached the Rettendon Turnpike. So, having left the Hungry Horse pub and gone along this route here, along the through Rawreth and then along the A1245, just as they pass the River Crouch, Sarah Saunders makes the call to Pat Tate, and along this 2 minutes 46 seconds of call, it's along this stretch of road here, heading towards the Rettendon Turnpike. Which should be just up here. Here we are. There we go, the Rettendon Turnpike, as you saw earlier, which is here. Yeah, so the call from Sarah Saunders to Pat Tate, it never took place down the track as they portray in the films and books. It actually took place after just leaving the River Crouch, and like I say, it lasted for 2 minutes 46 seconds, and the call would have ended before reaching the Rettendon Turnpike. So this call was made in Great Gregory in Basildon, where Sarah Saunders was residing at the time. Sarah Saunders said she phoned to make up with Pat Tate over the heated argument they had had that afternoon, even though she felt she wasn't in the wrong. If you can't remember, I covered this in an early video where they had a row at Sarah Saunders' mum's house. I think Pat had given Sarah Saunders a car to run about, but it was always breaking down, and they had a big argument over this, with Pat Tate taking the vehicle back to his place at Gordon Road. So, in Sarah Saunders' police interview, she stated that during that phone call, he was calm and apologised on his part. Nearing to the end of the conversation, Pat said, "I can't talk at the moment. I've got people with me. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Sarah Saunders said he didn't say who he was with at all. So who was Pat Tate talking about? Who was he with? Sarah Saunders said he would have said if he was with Mick Steele. Now the thing is, he can't say he's with Mick Steele because of a conversation that took place at Gordon Road between Pat Tate and Sarah Saunders, and Pat laughed about Mick Steele going up north and she would never see him again. Sarah Saunders took this as a threat on Mick Steele's life, and she actually met him a few days later at a McDonald's near Chelmsford, and she told Mick Steele what Pat had said, and Mick Steele just laughed it off. If Pat Tate said he was with Mick Steele in the Range Rover, then Sarah Saunders would have questioned him about being with him after what Pat had said about him going up north and not coming back again. I mean, Pat Tate couldn't risk Mick Steele finding this out, so he kept it quiet and said, "I can't talk at the moment. I've got people with me. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Yeah, I've just had a thought. Before I carry on with this video, if Mick Steele was in the Range Rover that night, and Pat Tate did mention he was with Mick Steele, then that would have been it. Pat Tate just put Mick Steele with him prior to his murder, and Sarah Saunders would have known about this. This would have ballsed everything up for Mick Steele and the others, and the executions could have not have taken place. Well, not that night anyway. I mean, Mick Steele being a clever man, he must have had a backup plan in place just in case something like this was to happen. I mean, if Sarah Saunders and Pat Tate had that conversation, and Pat did say, "I can't talk at the moment, Sarah. Mick's with me." Mick and the others cannot carry out the executions. They can't drive down that farm track, so Mick Steele would have had to take them somewhere else. Say that farm up at West Hanningfield, which is just a bit further up on the left-hand side, I think, from White House Farm, up that road along the A130. If you don't know West Hanningfield Farm, this is where a drugs drop was made by a light aircraft flying low, and apparently the pilot lost his bearings, and he dropped the cannabis shipment in the wrong field, and it landed in the on the farmer's land. He found it, and he rang the police, and it was in the local news at the time. Pat Tate had suggested to Tony Tucker that they should go up and look around West Hanningfield Farm, just in case the farmer or police failed to find all the cannabis that was dropped, and they could sell it themselves. But I think Tony Tucker talked Pat Tate out of it, and I don't think they ended up going up in the end. Right, so back to this video, and this is the police interview of Sarah Saunders, and we'll back up what I have said about the phone call that she made to Pat Tate was on the way to Rettendon and not down the track as they portray in the books and films. There is also more evidence that Mick Steele was in the Range Rover, having left the Hungry Horse pub car park and driving along Rawruth Lane, then on along the A1245 towards Rettendon that night. Right, what I will do is read a part of the police interview of Sarah Saunders, which is relevant to this video. This is DC Norton, and he is interviewing Sarah Saunders on the 13th of June 1996. The other bit of particular interest from Darren Nichols' evidence, Sarah, is that he will say when Mick Steele returned to the car having shot Pat, he said to Nichols to the words of, "Oh, you can't believe what that silly cow Sarah's just done. She's phoned Pat on the mobile on the way here." So after this, DC Norton goes on to say to Sarah Saunders, "You phoned Pat Tate at 6:44 p.m. on the 6th of December. Is that correct, Sarah?" And Sarah Saunders replies, "Yes." DC Norton then says, "We believe at the time Mick Steele was in the company with Pat Tate and they were driving towards Rettendon, and that night at approximately 7 p.m, Craig, Pat and Tony were shot dead by Mick Steele and Jack Wombs. You unfortunately, Sarah, phoned Pat during the last moments of his life. We will show you that mobile phones, I don't know if you understand how they work, but they work on an antenna basis where they go to the nearest radio mast, and the signal then goes up to a satellite. What I will do, Sarah, is show you the phone logs of Mick Steele and Jack Wombs that evening, and they were firstly in the Brentwood area of Childerditch, where they met Pat, Tony and Craig at the Halfway House pub. They then drove to the Hungry Horse at Rayleigh, where Mick Steele got out of his car and got into the Range Rover with Pat, Tony and Craig. When they left Rayleigh and were on their way to Rettendon is when you phoned him. Mick Steele's phone was showing as being in the area at the time. Darren Nichols says that Mick Steele was with Pat, Tony and Craig. The beacons show the phones being in the relevant area at the time. Donna Jaggers will give evidence that they were going to meet Mick Steele that night. So that was a police interview by DC Norton with Sarah Saunders, and in the interview DC Norton talks to Sarah Saunders about what Darren Nichols has said, what Mick Steele had told him, which was, "I can't believe that silly cow Sarah, what she's just done. She phoned Pat on the mobile on the way here." On the way here. On the way here, meaning that this conversation took place as they were at the track after the murders had been committed. Which also means Sarah Saunders phoned Pat on their way towards the track and not down the track like they portray in the films and books. Sarah Saunders phoned Pat Tate when they were making their way to the village of Rettendon and not down the track. In that same interview, DC Norton says they drove to the Hungry Horse in Rayleigh, where Mick Steele left his car and got into the back of the car with Pat, and when they left there on their way to Rettendon is when you phoned him. The phone call was made just after the Range Rover left the Hungry Hippo and headed towards Rettendon. The call lasted 2 minutes 46 seconds and the journey time from the Hungry Hippo to the farm track is approximately 12 minutes. So I've pinpointed the call started just after going over the River Crouch and just prior to reaching the Rettendon Turnpike. That's where the phone call took place. That was the last time Sarah Saunders spoke to Pat Tate. So I'm going to finish this video here today, and just remember, if you're on the Facebook group you can access the court transcripts, and if you do, just take a look through them and you'll realise that the ghostwriters have taken parts of the court transcripts and put them in the books, but also added their own fantasy and spin on them to sell the books. The films, we all know, the producers and directors, they have to make the scripts up and add more violence in order to sell the films. But I'm not saying the books and films are rubbish, because they're not. They make for good reading and they make good viewing. But not everything you read and watch on this Essex Boys saga in the films and books is exactly the truth, because it is not. So there you go. Right, okay, I'd just like to thank the YouTube subscribers. I hope you've enjoyed this particular video. And don't forget, you can join the Facebook group, the Real Essex Boys Murder Club. We have over 29,000 members now. And I think we have an average of about 5 posts going on a daily basis. So if you'd like to join, like I say, please feel free. Last of all, I'd like to thank the admins who do an absolutely fantastic job of keeping the group ticking over. So until next time, take care.